So I'd like to welcome everyone to the Nurses Station. I'm Lawana Brown. I'm one of the nursing faculty at Regis, and I have the pleasure of having with me this morning Miss Sandra Lindsay. It's wonderful to have you with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So let's move a little bit forward because I'll tell you that the way that I learned about you, of course, was through your most recent honor, which was the Presidential Medal of Freedom that you received.
Thank
How
you.
awesome, and how awesome for us. I felt like all the nurses were there because it was so great to see you receive that. And a lot of it had to do with some of the things that happened around COVID.
It was so surreal. You think about these people and you think, well, they're so far off. There is no way I'm ever going to
Mm-hmm.
get close to them. And then you get close to them and you go, oh my God. And,
Yeah.
you think even about the Presidential Medal of Freedom and you look back and it's all these powerhouse, influential
Mm-hmm.
people who have gotten it. Maya
Mm-hmm.
Angelou, Oprah Winfrey.
Yes. You were
Uh,
there with Denzel and Simone Biles were there, same
yeah,
group as you. One,
yeah. So
yeah.
you're like, wow, for ordinary, a nurse from New York to be here, it's a good day for nursing and a good day for
Yes,
healthcare.
yes. And not
Yeah.
ordinary, extraordinary. So let's go back to like December 2019. Boy, it's been almost 3 years when we first started hearing about, COVID-19, coronavirus, and here you are in the hospital there in New York. What was the thought that you had initially in the beginning of what it might look like versus what it turned out to be, of course, with New York at one point being an epicenter?
So with my global health lens, I knew that, when we travel, the world is much smaller than we think.
Oh,
And it's
yes.
getting smaller and smaller because we're so interconnected. So when I
Mhm.
first heard about it, I knew that, viruses and stuff travel with us. So I know it sooner or later we'd hear that it's here, but never thought that we would be knocked down, not in this day and age, to the extent that we did, that this virus would shut the entire world down.
Yes.
So I actually was away on vacation in December, had a great time. I felt like 2020 was going to be a great year. Um, Came back and, we were hearing about it, following the news, and March 7th is when we got our first patient in the hospital I worked. And
Mhm.
for a whole week, we were kind of very careful, making sure the assignments, there's no cross contamination. And we have personnel there making sure that the nurse who has the patient or the providers are donning and doffing. And by the next week, I was meeting with my team and talking about expanding ICU capacity, which we came in on Saturday, March 14, opened a new unit. And by the time I returned on March 16, the Monday, the place was unrecognizable.
Wow.
All the units were filled, isolation. There were signs all over, everybody in PPE. You just see people running around. You saw the fear in people's eyes. It was heartbreaking. And
Wow.
so it was from there. We needed roller skates, and every day was just, you never know what you're walking into. I would,
Right.
look in a mirror before I left my house and say, I'm going out. I don't know if I'm coming in. I don't know. I don't know what to expect. And I would, just talk to my friends, some of who were back in my homeland on the way, just to let them know what is going on here. Do they account for them?
Yeah.
Because it was really, really, really scary and intense every single day.
Yeah, as we watched the news and saw things unfold with everybody's eyes on New York, it just, struck a chord with all of us. I remember thinking, wow, I can't imagine, going to work and thinking that I could die. I mean, you would always think about maybe you might have a patient pass away. I mean, that even happens sometimes in labor and delivery, unfortunately. But to think that you would go to work and maybe possibly catch something that could kill you or your family, that was something out of the realm of possibility, even for nurses.
Right.
So, the fact that you drew on your resources in the way of friends and family to bolster you
Mhm.
to be able to do what you needed to do, was really something. I'll tell you that when we started hearing about a vaccine, there was a lot of polarization of people around it. Did you see some of that even there where you were in New York?
Oh, absolutely. Just prior even to the vaccine getting here, just talking about it as it got closer and closer to what we thought was going to be authorization, people were like, oh no, I am not taking it. And I would be like, I am ready. I would take both doses right now. This is crazy what we're seeing. As you mentioned, fearful that never have I was afraid of going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Never.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, just to think that you could get sick at work and people were just decompensating like that. So you could end up in an ICU bed in, a matter of hours or so if you have the virus, and people are just gasping for air, young, old, black, mostly you see dying. And, I would always want to look, who is this person? What did they do? Because you're
Yes.
just wrapping these bodies so quickly, getting them to the morgue, and then somebody else is waiting. But who was this
Mm-hmm.
person? Um, so I would look up and what were their histories? Some none. And there were no rhyme or reason as to how the virus was affecting different people. So I was very, very scared. But here as well, it was so polarized, with mostly people saying, oh no, I'm not going the first round. I'll wait and see. Christmas is coming. I hear about side effects. I don't want to be sick for the holidays, or
Mm-hmm.
I just need more information. And I was always the one saying, I am ready. I am ready.
Right.
I,
Yeah, for
I
this moment.
yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
afraid of the vaccine. I'm afraid of COVID.
Yeah, that's the thing. And being and seeing what was going on in the ICU units, I had the opportunity to interview a wonderful nurse from Charleston that actually was a photographer. He's a Pulitzer Prize win, like a prize-winning photographer, and he went into the units where he worked as a nurse because he became a nurse as a second career. And just looking at the pictures of some of the people that were there, young, old, black, white, just dying, and thinking to myself, I know what a ventilator sounds like, and what I could see hear the sounds and the alarms and the bells and all the things from having been a nurse, and just thinking to myself, wow. Now my initial thought was, ooh, vaccine kind of quick. I don't know. But then I thought to myself, vaccine, ventilator. Yeah, I'll take the vaccine because
Exactly.
I did I've seen the ventilator. You don't want that,
Yeah,
you
right.
want the vaccine. So I can see that. So how did it come that you ended up being the first American to get the shot?
So I had no idea that I was going to be the first. With all my verbalization of I am ready to get the vaccine, I am, big advocate. I, I would go home, listen to the experts, read everything I could. I was comfortable with my decision. So when I got the call that, the vaccine is coming to our hospital, are you still willing to take it? I go, absolutely. And,
Mhm.
there were some other folks, very few, who were also willing to take it. So I'm like, I'm ready. So I went first, and then the news broke. The governor reported this was the first shot administered in New York, and the entire place blew up,
Wow.
um, because I didn't expect it. My family didn't expect it. I didn't broadcast it because I didn't
Mhm.
think anything of it.
Right. It was a
You
personal
know,
thing for you, right?
yeah, I just think I'm going to take the shot. I am ready. And, as I didn't prepare anything to say. I didn't know there would be press conferences. I didn't know I would be talking to you right now.
Mhm.
But, I've lived it. I know how I felt about it.
Right.
So I could talk about it freely from the heart,
Mhm. Mhm.
and not go off a script about how I feel. And I think that that was probably the best thing to do then.
The fact that you were the first is not by accident. I don't believe things happen by accident. And I think you were already prepared, even though you didn't really know, that you were going to be first, but it's good
Right.
that you were. To be a nurse, as the first, so significant to be a woman as the first, to be an African American, person as the first.
Right.
So many things that played into that. And in the communities, even now, we've seen higher vaccination rates, but we still struggle with folks who have issues with the vaccine. How have you talked to maybe patients, family members about how to overcome that in conversation with patients who just really part of it's probably rooted in fear?
So, yeah, so I want to find out, like, what's the reason? What do you know? Tell me what you know. And sometimes they don't know anything. So then,
Mhm.
it depends on what you find out when you do your assessment, the path that you take, right? For some
Right.
people, it's the conspiracy theories, and some you can educate and talk to them about it, and they come to, okay, let me look into this. And some, they're so far gone that you're never,
Right.
ever going to change them. For some people, I've found out sometimes it's fear of the needle. And there are things that can be done about that. For some people, it's fear of, I don't know what's in there. Well, maybe, here are some resources or trusted sites, or do you have a doctor that you trust that has been caring for you
Mhm.
for years? You've entrusted your care um, in that person's, you're
Mhm.
entrusted your health in that person's care for years. Perhaps you can have a talk with them, tell them what you're afraid of, let them educate you.
Exactly.
So I think the first thing is finding out what
Right.
people are afraid of, what they know, what they don't know. Then you can tailor your interventions
Right.
accordingly.
Right. I love how you marry everything with nursing and how
Yeah,
it's a
the
part of
nurse,
the nursing
it's
process.
the nursing
It's what you do.
process.
Figure out
It
what you're
is the
working
nursing
with us.
process.
Yes. Assess
Yep,
first. Yeah. I love
yep.
that. Yeah. So that's what we definitely want to be doing. So let us know. So everyone knows that the majority of our guests, with the exception of one, are nurses. And so let us know a little bit about what type of work you're doing currently.
I currently serve as the Director of Patient Care Services. That's in the Division of Nursing for the Division of Critical Care. And what that means is that I have 6 units under my division. I have the Surgical Intensive Care Unit, Cardiothoracic Intensive Care Unit, Medical Intensive Care Unit. I have 2 of those because we need a large medical intensive care unit. I have the coronary care unit and the respiratory care unit. So I'm in charge of practice, operations, regulatory, everything to do with these units,
Wow,
24/7.
yeah, that's an amazing amount of work. That is amazing amount of work. So I'll tell you, one of the things I always like to do in these conversations is to go back a few steps and to just find out, how did we get to the point where Sandra Lindsay is a nurse? Was this like a dream? Take us back to before you were a nurse. What brought you to this particular area of practice?
So I was born and raised in Jamaica, West Indies. And at the age of around 8, 9, I grew up with my grandparents. So my grandmother had chronic illnesses and I would help her. Back then you were doing the urine dipstick,
Mhm.
the dipstick in the urine, and then you match it up to the colors to get the blood glucose range. And I would administer medications. She was very functional. She was a school teacher. And I guess that was my evaluation assessment. She's doing well. She's
Mhm.
carrying on her daily activities, but I loved caring for her. And my brother and I, we would sit and talk about what we'd like to be when we grow up. He wanted to be the doctor, of course. And I said, I want to be the nurse. And we would role play of him having an office and patients would come in and I'm the nurse taking care of them. And I really love that. Moreover, in Jamaica, nursing is a very prestigious profession. I love to see the nurses, how they carried themselves and the respect they commanded. And so when I migrated here in 1986, I came with my dream of going to college to be a nurse. I did not start right away. I had to work to save up enough money to send myself to school. So I started as a nursing attendant. And then I went to a 2-year college for my associates and then worked my way up. Last year, I graduated with my doctorate in health sciences.
Amazing.
Yeah, with
That's
a
amazing.
concentration, thank you, in global health, leadership, and organizational behavior.
Wow. So it sounds like you probably were born to do this work, to enjoy it as much as you did.
I think when you're born, everyone has a purpose, and I think this is my purpose, and I'm coming into more of my purpose. So I'm
That's
embracing it
amazing.
and
That's
give gratitude.
wonderful. So when you were in nursing school, I know we go through all the different units, and most of the time as we're going through, we're thinking, hey, do I want to work here? Do I want to work there? I'll tell you, when I went through the critical care unit, I was like, yeah, no. I know there was so much going on, and the patients were so complex, and there was so many things that were needed. So when you were going through nursing school, were you drawn to the sicker side, or well, to the side that required more care?
Yeah, initially I wanted to work in the emergency department. I did my externship there, really loved it, but at the time they weren't hiring new graduates. And so I went to an oncology unit, which is where I got a good foundation in med surge. And then I decided to move on to the ICU. I love a challenge. And so that was my challenge. And I moved around in critical care. I did medicine, medical critical care, surgery. I did coronary care unit. The heart is my favorite organ to
Oh,
study when I was in school, and so I enjoyed that. And I had no aspirations of going into nursing leadership. I loved my bedside nursing, and I had fun with my team at the bedside. And I was just tapped and say, hey, we're seeing, some characteristics of the leader, and we'd like you to think about it. And so I did, and got in
that's
and just kept moving
amazing.
up. Yeah.
And I think that the leadership that you're in right now, I mean, what you've had in the past prepared you for this space, because when you say you love the bedside, that's the thing that's always going to kind of be with you. And that gives you a great vision when you've worked the bedside, to be over those units. So I'm
Yeah.
sure, yeah.
And still to this day, I'm always challenging myself to find a balance between both, because I don't want to lose my skills. And, when a problem arises and I can give my input
Mhm.
clinically, I love that. I love to still step in a room and help my nurses with a turn a patient, do a bath, you know, whatever, get a patient out of bed. I still read my journal so I can keep abreast. I think it's very important for leaders to have a working knowledge of what's new in the profession so that you can guide your staff and they trust you. It builds trust.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I can tell you from working in the hospital, I'm an old labor and delivery nurse. I work in women's clinic now, but I can tell you from working in the hospital, you're the kind of leader that we find hard when you call and say you need someone, we find it hard to say no, because we know
Right.
that you're the person that's going to be there with us in the room on the floor. So you're the one that, would call from the hospital and I'd be like, oh, if Miss Sandra's calling me, they really need me. I have to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is wonderful to have that. Here we are. I mean, COVID's not going away. We're still, we're in a different part of the pandemic, and we have some things we can use in the way of medicines as well as the vaccine to help us. I want to talk a little bit about your units there at the hospital and nursing. I, as a nurse, can see that nursing was changed by this in a lot of ways. What kind of changes have you seen, and what does that carry for us, you think, in the future of nursing as a profession?
So I see burnout. I see stress. I see fear every time people hear the numbers are going up. You hear about a new variant. I see exhaustion. I see there are some trust issues among
Yes.
nurses because healthcare workers in general. So I think, not I think, in the beginning, there were so many unknowns
Mhm.
regarding the virus and things kept changing. And for some people, they understand that it was novel. And so we're all learning about it. We're building the plane while we're flying it. But for
Mhm.
some people, it's, well, there was no transparency and we didn't know and you didn't tell us. And So again, it
Right.
depends on person. So seeing all of those emotions, sadness, um, fear for the profession moving forward. We had
Right.
exodus like a lot of other
Yes.
places did. So some people are fearful, well, what's going to happen with the profession? That exodus has caused me to be working harder as
Hmm.
everyone is vying for this limited pool of resources.
Hmm.
So it's a mixed bag. And then you have some who are resilient and they're looking for new challenges. Okay, we need to get back to where we were. And, depending on when people are ready, and you have to do your assessment again to know when people are ready, then you,
Right.
you kind of go down memory lane because it helps to build resilience. Remember
Right.
when we used to do this? Remember when
Mhm.
we had this ugly sweater
Mhm.
party and this and that? Remember when
Yes.
we went to a national conference? Remember
Right.
when we, used to do these things for our patients? And some people love that. So we're seeing different stages of how people are recovering, but it's
Mhm.
been it's been very challenging.
Yeah, it is a challenge. And I love that you mentioned resilience because there's so many things that we as nurses do to care for patients. We have to do as much to care for ourselves. I have a podcast that I do as well that I talk to nurses to kind of debrief. I think about the fact that when we give report is not just what's in the chart. It's kind of our way of therapy because we get to debrief and take off everything that's happened during the shift and listen to the other nurses. So I think that for us, the healing that we need is going to have to come from us because I don't know that anybody else really knows what we need, you
And
know?
that's what I say to staff. But for some people, they can accept that. For some folks, they see it as no, it's the organization's responsibility.
Hmm.
So and to that end, you have also all these resources because
Hmm.
thankfully the organization I work for has a ton of resources to help us. But then you'll also find that people aren't using it
Yes.
as much as you think they should, because if we're in this space where we need healing and you have all these different resources for free, why wouldn't we use it?
Hmm.
So it's very challenging, um, but at the end of the day, we do want our nurses to be physically and mentally well and prepared and not work in fear. But it's a challenge getting people to use the resources and healing, take some of the
Right.
responsibility for healing.
Exactly. You're right. Nurses make terrible patients. We know
Yeah.
that. We make
And,
terrible patients. So that's
and
a part of our problem.
resilience is a practice. You have
Yes.
to practice, and you get better and better at it. You don't just get up one
Exactly.
day and say, I'm resilient, I'm gonna bounce
No,
back. It's an investment, it's a practice.
it
But
is.
as you say, we make terrible patients. And unfortunately, we see ourselves only as healers and not people who also need healing at some point.
Exactly. And I love that. We do sometimes need to be healed. And we certainly know that with leaders like yourself and hopefully the innovative new group of nurses that's coming on, Regis puts out about 600 a year of
Mhm.
graduate nurses, in the graduate and undergraduate, that they'll be a part of that healing because that's something that we definitely need to have happen. But it does make us so proud to see all that you've done and accomplished. It's just wonderful. And I love the idea. I often say I haven't worked bedside because I work as a nurse practitioner in clinic, but I'm like, if I ever have to go back to bedside in the hospital, I know exactly who I would want to work for. And you're one of those people that I would come and work for. I don't live in New York, but I might consider relocating just to get the opportunity.
Oh, thank you
So
so
thank
much.
you. It is
Thank
such a
you.
pleasure to talk with you. We're so very proud of all that you've done, and we celebrate you and the nurses there in those units. Please let them know how much we, as nursing everywhere, really appreciate all that they've done in this time for us.
Thank you. And my accomplishments is a big accomplishment, a big win for nurses. I share this with all the nurses in this nation and around the world. So
Wonderful.